Good morning. Just going to chat through this essay topic because I know that it looks a bit weird in the way it's set out, and you've got your stimulus up the top and the question down the bottom, and then hey, make sure you look at two subsystems. So just the way it's set out is a bit clunky, but that's the way it is on the exam, so that's why I've done it like that. With your essay as well, you might be wondering, oh, how do I research for this? How do I develop a knowledge base for this? Well, you've got your Living Lingo book. That's really good, and there's nothing wrong with quoting Burrage and Delapse from Living Lingo. But also, I've given you many different texts and things for you to use as examples. So it's not just theorists like the Living Lingo book, but you're looking specifically at examples of the language itself. So don't just, when you write an essay, don't just rely on, oh, this theorist, Pinker says this and Halliday says that, and well, actually give me some of the language itself, which is evidence for what you're talking about. Okay, hey, let's have a look at this now. The question is this: how are linguistic features of public language used to exercise power and authority in contemporary Australian society? Now, it might seem it's quite a complex topic, sure, but it's not above you at all. You know what linguistic features are. Public language is any language that's been put out for the public to understand, and we know that that we've got many different agencies that put language out to the public. Have a look at the COVID-19 text. Have a look at the daily briefings that our Premier gives, or the other premiers around Australia, or politicians around the world. Have a look at medical experts who give information. Even your teacher, like, this is public language. I know it's a private school and everything, but I'm putting out language for you to understand. So you can use many different sources in public language to exercise power and authority. It's a real, I would suggest that you talk about COVID-19 because at the moment we want people, well, the Premier wants people to stay inside. And how has he exercised power and authority to get people inside? Okay, so there's one really specific example. You can look up some of his language about how he gets people to do what he wants them to do. And he wants them to do that for a good reason. Like, he's trying to save everyone from dying and getting a disease and, this horrible pandemic. Sure, but he is still exercising power and authority. So don't take this to mean a negative thing. Power and authority. This is not a negative thing. Some people, though, only think of it as a negative thing. Okay. Talk about power. So that's being able to exert your will on someone else. Authority is about hierarchy, isn't it? People above you. Okay. So these are different ideas, although they are linked to each other. It does say contemporary Australian society. So don't go too much broader than Australia. Okay. Yes, look at two subsystems, but if you're looking at a linguistic feature from semantic value, jargon, that kind of thing, semantics and lexicology would be in jargon, and the jargon of COVID-19. Okay, COVID-19 itself is a shortening, isn't it? It's an abbreviation. We've got CO from corona and V from virus, and D is disease. So it's a creative word formation. It's a neologism, COVID-19. All right, so you can do that. Make sure you look at that throughout your piece. Guys, I do want to point you towards the stimulus. You can use these as kind of little indicators of what you could talk about in a paragraph, okay? So just let's have a look here. The first one, stimulus A, says language is power, life, and the instrument of culture. The instrument of domination and liberation. Notice how this is like a general discussion of language and what it does. Power, life, culture, domination, liberation. Notice how these are the antithesis of each other. So we've got power, life, and culture. That's good. But domination and liberation are antithetical. Okay. I would probably put this in an introduction. All right. And I'd have a discussion and maybe quote part of that. All right. Not the whole thing, but I'd quote part of it in an introduction because it's kind of broad. It looks at so many ideas here. Whereas these next stimulus, they look at different things, okay, or more specific things. Stimulus B, language is power in ways more literal than most people think. When we speak, we exercise the power of language to transform reality. Why don't more of us realize the connection between language and power? You could look at the way maybe a pastor might use language and his discussion of the Bible in order to describe how reality, or what reality means and how you interpret reality based on your worldview, maybe a Christian worldview. Okay, so this is about how is language transforming the way you see the world, and actually the Bible is a good source of that. We look at the world in a certain way as Christians, and the language tells us that. What language? Well, the Bible, pastors, speakers, that kind of thing. Have a look at this next one. This is George Orwell. He's a writer. He wrote 1984. He wrote some really interesting, odd things, and he was very critical of politicians and government. The great enemy of clear language is insincerity. Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. The appearance of solidity to pure wind. So this is like the wind out of someone's mouth, and it appears to be good and solid and wholesome. So you could talk about political speak here. If you wanted to branch out, I know that the question asked you for Australian, but you could talk about Trump and Trumpisms and his lies and that kind of thing there. But you'd have to connect that to Australian society as well. Or you could talk about another politician, an Australian politician who's lied and covered things up, maybe that kind of thing. Here, this is from The Land Still Speaks. Well, that tells me about Indigenous people. So this paragraph, you could go talk about Indigenous people. Recognition of Indigenous languages and support for Indigenous language programs stand alongside land rights, health, education, justice, housing, employment and other services as part of the overall process of pursuing social justice and reconciliation in Australia. Notice the language itself is quite formal. It's from a doctor who's speaking from Edith Cowan University, speaking with power about Indigenous issues. One might go so far as to say that without recognition of the Indigenous people and their languages, many other programs will be less effective, because the lack of recognition will show that the underlying attitudes of the dominant society have not changed significantly. Here is about power and language. Do you see that? Actually, using the language of the people is how you exercise power and authority within that people group. If you don't use the language of that people group, then they're not going to listen to you or not going to understand it. Okay? So you see how each of these could be a different paragraph. So based on these, maybe on the side of the margin here, you could maybe summarize what's the idea in each of these quotes, and then you could go and research that thing for more kind of detailed examples of language. Okay, guys, I hope that was helpful for you, but don't be afraid to just dip into Living Lingo for your first essay. That's totally fine as well. Okay. Notice this does not explicitly say formal language. That's fine. That's fine. Power and control and authority is kind of, it lends itself to formal language, so it's implied that it's formal. Guys, good luck with that. Make sure you ask me any questions if you need to.